rising and falling is as old as time itself. From ancient Rome to the Mongol Empire, it's a cycle that just keeps repeating. But what if there's a hidden pattern, a kind of blueprint for how it all comes apart? Well, we're going to look at three huge modern empires, Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union, to see if we can find it.
So that's the big question, right? Why do even the mightiest, most untouchable powers eventually fall apart? Is it just a string of bad luck? One terrible leader making all the wrong moves? Or is there something, deeper going on? We're about to find that the answer is usually found in a set of shared weaknesses, the kind that fester just below a very powerful surface.
Okay, first up, let's head back to 16th century Spain. I want you to picture an empire that was so unbelievably rich from all the gold and silver coming from the New World that it looked completely invincible. It was a global superpower with this glittering, almost mythical reputation. But all that glitter was hiding some really deep structural problems.
So here's the crazy part. Spain's greatest strength, those treasure fleets packed with silver, actually became its fatal flaw. This flood of money caused insane inflation and basically killed local industry. I mean, why bother making things when you can just buy everything? At the same time they were pouring money into endless wars, their monarchs weren't up to the task of managing this huge empire, and other European powers were getting stronger. And the final nail in the coffin? The colonies themselves decided they'd had enough and fought for their independence.
And this really gets to the heart of what happened to Spain. Having all the wealth in the world doesn't mean a thing if your economy isn't resilient and your government isn't stable. It's just a sandcastle at high tide. Beautiful for a moment, but it's only a matter of time before the waves of history wash it all away.
All right, let's jump forward in time to our next case, the British Empire. The empire on which the sun never sets. This was the largest empire in history. But its decline wasn't about a flood of treasure. No, this was driven by something totally different. The pure exhaustion from global war and the unstoppable force of new ideas.
For Britain, the two world wars changed everything. They left the country financially broken and its military stretched thin across the globe. It just became way too expensive to maintain a global empire, especially when things were so tough back home. But even more than that, the world's whole mindset was changing. You had these powerful anti-colonial movements, like Gandhi in India, demanding independence. The moral argument for having an empire was just falling apart, not just in the colonies, but back in Britain, too.
So the fall of the British Empire teaches us something absolutely crucial. Military and economic power, they're not enough. When the world's ideas about what's right and wrong begin to shift, and when your own people stop believing in the mission, the whole structure starts to crack. It turns out no empire is immune to those powerful currents of history.
Now, Britain's decline was a long, slow process. It took about a century. But our next example? It's the complete opposite. A sudden, absolutely breathtaking collapse that happened in just a handful of years.
Let's talk about the Soviet Union. For decades, it was one of the two global superpowers, this massive, rigid fixture that seemed like it would be there forever. So its collapse wasn't just surprising, it was so fast that it left the entire world in shock. How on earth did this red colossus just crumble from the inside out?
Well, the Soviet system was basically rotting from within. Its command economy was completely stagnant, it couldn't provide basic goods for its people, but it was still pouring billions into the military. Then along comes Mikhail Gorbachev. His big reforms, glasnost, which means openness, and perestroika, for restructuring, were supposed to save the system, but instead they just pulled back the curtain and showed everyone how weak it really was. Suddenly, people could speak out. Nationalism exploded, first in Eastern Europe and then inside the Soviet republics themselves. And that failed coup attempt in 1991, that was pretty much the final blow.
The lesson from the Soviet Union is incredibly powerful. A rigid, brittle system can't survive the shock of rapid change. You had this perfect storm of a broken economy, a little taste of freedom, and this powerful pull of national identity. It was all it took to bring the entire thing crashing down, faster than anyone thought possible.
Okay, so we've looked at three really different stories, right? A slow fade into history, a gradual letting go of power, and then a sudden, shocking collapse. But as different as they seem, they are all connected by four common threads of decay that run through every single one of them.
Think of these as the four horsemen of imperial decline. First, you've got a fragile economic foundation. Second, there's some kind of internal political weakness or strain. Third, you have pressure from rival powers on the outside. And fourth, the incredibly powerful force of nationalism, trying to tear the empire apart from within.
And this slide right here is where it all snaps into focus.
Just look at how the patterns repeat across different centuries and continents. Under economic, you see Spain's reliance on treasure, Britain's post-war debt, and the USSR's failing command economy. It's the same problem, just a different flavor. For internal strain, it's weak leaders, a public that's had enough, or a broken government. External pressure? That's rival powers, world wars, or ideological battles. And finally, nationalism, that basic human desire for self-rule. It's what fueled revolts from Latin America to the streets of Kiev. It's the same anatomy of decay every single time.
So, what's the big takeaway here? What do we do with all this? Well, these stories aren't just dry history lessons. They are timeless warnings about the nature of power itself. And they have echoes that we can absolutely still hear today.
At the end of the day, power isn't some fortress that you build and then own forever. It's much more like a fragile dance, a constant balancing act between economics, government, culture, and of course, the relentless forward march of history itself.
And that leaves us with one last question to think about. When you look around at the great powers of our world right now, and you apply these lessons we've learned from Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union, what echoes of empire do you see today?